is 9/11 Freefall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I'm your host, Andy Steele. Tonight, Richard Gage is back, and he's with Steven Dusterwald, structural engineer. They're going to be talking about Richard's new tour, going through the southwest of the United States, screening the new Firefighters film. He may be coming somewhere near you, so you're going to want to hear this interview tonight, and they get into a discussion just about the state of things in their professions as a result of the cover-up of the evidence proving that buildings 1, 2, and 7 of the World Trade Center were brought down in controlled demolitions on 9/11. And again, talk to engineers out there. There's many of them who want to sign the petition but are afraid of repercussions. Many imagined, just kind of fearing the same old mass peer pressure, a fact that we talk about all the time on this show. So this is a really good interview. I know you guys are going to like it. I'm going to play it for you in just a minute. Before I do play it, however, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We'll do that beginning now. And that's 10 seconds. Steven Dusterwald is a licensed professional structural engineer with 37 years of experience in the field, including 25 years as owner and principal of his own structural engineering firm in Las Vegas. He is focused on the design of nuclear power plants, large commercial buildings, and industrial buildings. And this week he's joined by Richard Gage, AIA, who's a San Francisco Bay Area architect of 25 years, a member of the American Institute of Architects, and of course the founder and CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Richard has worked on most types of building construction, including numerous fireproof steel frame buildings. He's been all over TV, giving presentations all over the world, bringing to people's attention the fact that buildings 1, 2, and 7 were indeed brought down in controlled demolitions that day. He's known by this audience very well. Guys, both of you, welcome to 9/11 Freefall.
Glad to be here.
Thank you, Steve, and Andy also.
So, Richard, you're back on the show. You're constantly on the move, doing new things. You're hot with this new Firefighter DVD, no pun intended there. So you're back on to talk about what you're going to be doing in the Southwest, but we got a lot to catch up on regarding, last time you were here, you were talking about the upcoming premiere of the Firefighter film. So bring our audience up to date. Let them know, how did that go in New York? What was the reception? What were some of the things that you guys did when you were premiering the film and giving your press conference and all of those great activities?
It was pretty exciting. New York brings together activists from all over the world, and it is so incredible to meet everybody who has one thing, that dominates their lives, and that's spreading the truth about 9/11 and what really happened there. We had 120 people come to the church there, the West Park Presbyterian, and they came to watch Eric Lawyer in person with his reentry into the 9/11 Truth movement with this new film, which was filmed a few years ago, but finally edited. And Eric and I were on the platform in this film, and we took 20 different myths apart, from the official story, from the public, even from firefighters themselves, myths that just aren't true and indicate a complete cover-up of what really happened to the destruction of all three World Trade Center skyscrapers. So in the film, we took apart, for instance, the illegal destruction of evidence in a crime scene, NIST's complete obfuscation of the evidence that wasn't covered up and destroyed. I'm going to be heading on tour with this film to show it to all across the country. That's coming up, but it was really well received, Andy, and I'm telling you, we together went back and forth in such a frenzied pace, taking apart these myths that I really enjoyed watching it for the first time at the premiere in New York. And Eric Lawyer is on fire again, no pun intended. He was amazing. And then we introduced the film, and then afterwards we took a lot of questions. It went on for an hour and a half, and it was filmed also. So I hope we can treat your listeners with that. There's a lot of high energy in New York. We had just come off of some activities that day, such as being at Ground Zero in front of the 9/11 Museum, handing out our alternative guide, What You Will Not See in the 9/11 National Museum. And, of course, that includes the evidence for nanothermite, the video evidence of the destruction of all three of these skyscrapers, particularly Building 7, which most people don't know anything about, which we'll be talking about today. And then we joined We Are Change down at the PATH station right in front of the new Building 7 at the site where the old Building 7 collapsed in 7 seconds. And lots of curious onlookers gathered around as we gave the evidence and had some really nice posters spread out on the ground. I mean, there were at least 3 or 4 or 5 dozen people around. A lot of tourists coming on 9/11 to the World Trade Center site. And then we had our press conference with Eric Lawyer up at the Times Square, right in front of the New York Times building. And we're looking up at the billboard, which we had erected with funds from our supporters, $9,000 to put into the face of the New York Times. A quote from one of their chief Washington correspondent, David Sanger, who says, "We found no evidence to suggest that anything other than airplanes had brought these buildings down." And so we say, well, clearly you haven't been looking, and we cite a bunch of that evidence. So we hope to, in fact, tomorrow is the last day that billboard will be up. People can still see it in New York. So we had a press conference there. We had our own press because we do not seem to attract the attention of the mainstream media. They seem to be avoiding this issue, absolutely censoring the topic of what really happened on 9/11, that there are 2,350 architects and engineers demanding a new investigation. That story has yet to get onto mainstream media in a big way, although, as we all know on this radio station, we did have a significant breakthrough with C-SPAN where we reached 3 million people thanks to the efforts of none other than Andy Steele and a whole bunch of volunteers who worked real hard to pester them to make sure that the Building 7 got onto the air and that they were responsive ultimately. And it's now become one of the most watched videos on C-SPAN's Washington Journal.
Right, and like 5th in the entire archives overall, so that is a tremendous big deal, and I have no doubt that we are living in historical times. There's I think it's a Chinese expression that says, may you live in interesting times. I think we are, to say the least. And regardless of whether or not the corporate media continues to stonewall, people are waking up to this left and right. I know when we were talking several weeks ago, maybe not on the show, it might have been on a conference call or something, but you said that you noticed that a lot of people now have been exposed to this issue. A lot of people have been kind of educated on it in one way or another, and even if they're not active, they're still aware of it. And so we're having a tremendous impact in the political discourse of this country and the vigilance of the people. not willing to just accept what they're handed, and that is a three-dimensional effect of our activism. So I commend everybody that has taken part in this. And maybe someday, you know, they named that new tower that's being erected in the place of the World Trade Centers. Are supposed to be taking their place as the new iconic tower there in the skyline of New York. They're calling it the Freedom Tower. I think that someday after we expose this, maybe they'll rename it the Truth Tower. That would be something that I would suggest.
Perfect. I'd never heard that. I love it, Andy.
Now, Steven, you've been on the show before. Our listeners may have not heard that show. We've been doing this for 3 years here, a lot of shows in the archives. So just briefly remind our audience about yourself and your background and why you're interested in this issue, why you're concerned enough to have put your name to the petition and be helping Richard in the way that you do and with this tour coming up.
All right. I graduated in 1973 from the Cooper Union in New York City, which is one of the only tuition-free private schools in the country. It was endowed by Peter Cooper, the inventor of the steam engine in the United States. Anyway, I got my degree in 1973, and my initial job experience was designing nuclear power plants for Bechtel Power Corporation. I worked on the Mississippi Power and Light Units 1 and 2 in Mississippi, and the Calvert Cliffs nuclear station at Calvert Cliff in Lusby, Maryland. From there, I got a job at the Nevada test site where I designed heavy drilling equipment and structures for the large diameter hole drilling equipment that they have up there. I did that for 5 years. And then I went to a regular structural engineering firm in Las Vegas, which was a big advance for me because the ride up to the test site every day was an hour and a half each way. And they had buses that would pick you up at bus stations, and, you know, but still 3 hours a day commuting was just murder. And as soon as I could get a job in Las Vegas for a regular structural engineering firm, I was delighted. I worked for 5 years. During that time, I was getting my civil engineering license and my structural engineering license. And after 5 years with the two licenses, I decided I was going to be better off on my own, charging the same that that my bosses would charge for my time and pay me 1/6 of it. So I've been in business for myself ever since 1985. And I do a lot of small commercial buildings. I did the 32,000 square foot addition to the Casino Royale on the Strip, and that was steel framed with concrete fill over steel deck with shear stud connectors, just like was used in the World Trade Center. And I've done a number of tilt-up concrete and masonry warehouse and offices and other institutional and industrial buildings. And basically the structural engineering license lets you work on any structural engineering project. Now, a CE, just a civil engineer, he's a professional engineer in civil engineering. He can only do structures up to 35 feet high. And above 35 feet high, it has to be a structural engineer. So the fact that I got my structural engineering license means that I can work on any building of any size or configuration. And that it took years of studying and experience to get to where I was able to pass the structural exam. But I passed it in 1982. I got my first PE license in 1979, and then I got my structural in 1982. So basically, engineering is the application of the laws of physics. So basically, it's an application of science. It's applied science. And we use the laws of physics to determine the way things work in the real world. And all the things, these anomalies in the collapse of the World Trade Center buildings are just so obvious that the official story is just pure baloney. There are just so many holes in it that, I mean, there's the sudden, extremely sudden, rapid onset of destruction. That is not caused by fires. Fires have a slow, as the fire gets bigger and hotter, then it burns out an area and continues, it looks for new fuel sources and so on. So that's a gradual process, not a rapid, sudden thing. And the way that the buildings came down, as I said before, the steel alloys that are used for structural steel for buildings have a high ductility, which is the ability of the material to absorb energy. When it's overloaded, it continues to absorb energy by deforming. And that is built into the physical constitution of the steel. The alloy is designed to have a high ductility with a large elastic range, where when a member is loaded, it acts like a spring. When you add the load, it deflects, you take the load off, and it comes back to the level. Now, then when you get to the yield point is where the material has now been stretched beyond the elastic limit, and it goes into the plastic range, and that's where you apply a load, it deflects, and you take the load off, and it doesn't come back all the way up. There's a permanent deformation, and that's called the plastic deformation, a permanent set in the material. And only after you've gone through the elastic range and the plastic range do you get to the rupture point at which the material fails. And when those buildings came down, there was no large deformations that you would expect that the material would have to go through in order to rupture. And so there was no ductility evident in the collapse of the buildings, and it looked like they were shattering. They looked like they were made out of glass. They just shattered. I mean, you can see it, that descent, and it just makes the thing just so unbelievable. There's 40,000 tons of structural steel there, and it offered no resistance. I mean, you know, the fact that it was in free fall for the first 2 seconds, even NIST agrees with that. And, you know, their animation for the collapse doesn't look anything like the film of the actual collapse. So, I mean, that's another smoking gun. And another thing is the symmetry of the collapse. I mean, this thing about one column failing, causing a global failure. The structural engineering codes are written to prevent any type of failure from a single member. There's redundancies, and that column, the column that they claim was pushed off of its seat, had like 3 other members all framed into it. And the amount of thermal expansion is for an unrestrained beam. So when you take it, you raise it so many degrees, it'll lengthen so far if it's unrestrained. But this beam was restrained at both ends. And so all you have to do is provide enough restraint that the deflection would be the amount of elongation that would take place if there was nothing there. And so there was certainly enough material to hold that beam on its column. And even if it failed, there would be a local failure of few beams that were attached to that column, but all the other columns would be unaffected because there is no chain of load distribution laterally for vertical loads. I mean, that's why you have so many columns. And the fact that all these columns failed at the exact same time, you know, that's instantaneous. You know, like the failure went from that one column to all the other columns in the building at the same time and caused them all to collapse. It's just such an implausible story that, you know, it's ridiculous. So anyway, there's that, and then the symmetrical collapse. Again, this is where NIST, their animation of the collapse doesn't look anything like the film of the building collapsing. So that and the material, the white dust that covered downtown New York, all has remnants of thermitic materials, the iron and aluminum oxide. It starts out, the mixture starts out as iron oxide and aluminum, and then the aluminum takes the oxygen from the iron and forms pure iron, and that's what formed these micro spheres, iron, little spheres of pure iron. And so just like water coming out of a spray bottle, the droplets form perfect spheres because the surface tension forms it into a sphere, so there's no deformation of the droplet, so it's a perfect sphere. And that material that covered downtown New York has that, those micro iron spheres. And in fact, it's a test of authenticity of the material. If it doesn't have those iron spheres, then it's not the material from downtown New York. So I've gone over pretty much all the main things that I find really crazy, but I'd probably like to get Richard back in and have some of his commentary.
Right, but that's actually according to some studies that were done, was what distinguished the World Trade Center dust, just like you said, was the presence of these microspheres in them. So that's something important to note. I don't think we state that enough on the show, and that was in the booklet that was just published by AE911 Truth, Beyond Misinformation. So we're going to be talking about that booklet pretty soon, but first, the reason you guys are on the show today and drawn together at this moment is because Richard's going to be doing a tour all throughout the Southwest, various stops screening this film. So the first stop is going to be in Las Vegas. I want you to talk about this tour. Whoever wants to speak first, just chime in. But how you guys got together, had this idea, and what this tour is going to involve.
We started with the building this tour around a structural engineering conference that Steve will talk about in a minute. But we said, hey, we're going to be in Las Vegas. Why don't we just see if the Las Vegas people, the supporters there, want to have a presentation, and they did. And then how about Pahrump, which is just an hour or two away. And then we go, well, my gosh, why don't we just talk to Steve Cohn, our local action group team leader in Phoenix. And sure enough, Phoenix and Albuquerque, and then Dallas wanted to be on board. Houston and Austin wanted to be on board, and you can't leave out Denver. So now we have 8 cities on this tour. We start in Las Vegas October 3rd, and what we're going to be doing, and we end up in Denver on October 10th, we're going to be, I'll give you the whole tour. So the 4th is Pahrump, October 5th is Phoenix, October 6th is Albuquerque, October 7th, Dallas, October 8th in Austin, the 9th in Houston, and the 10th in Denver. That doesn't leave me much rest, but that's okay.
That's for sure.
I'm doing what I need to be doing to try to save the world, because what we didn't mention, of course, here, and what comes up during the Q&A after each of these film screenings. These will be the premiere of the film Firefighters, Architects, Engineers, Expose 9/11 Myths in each of these cities. People want to know, after they see this evidence that Steve has so eloquently described from the structural engineering point of view, they want to know, how this happened. They want to know, where were they? They want to know, where was the media? They want to know, why would the government lie to us? They want to know, and when we say that, we're talking about NIST, a government agency that clearly lied to us, as Steve highlighted. They want to know who did this. They have a lot of questions, and we talk about that. That is to say, we encourage them to ask the questions, and we let them know where some of these other answers can be found in some of the researchers' works, such as Kevin Ryan, who's written Another 19, such as David Ray Griffin, who's written New Pearl Harbor, 9/11 Commission, Omissions and Distortions. and lots of people have done a lot of work on answering the questions that we don't speculate on as technical and building professionals.
And you said this would be centered around a conference, and so Steven, I want you to go ahead and describe that conference.
Basically, like I say, there's a lot of these structural engineering associations. Like I say, I think 44 states have structural engineering associations, and that's where the people, the structural engineering community, they sign up, become a member of these associations, and then they, like when the new building code comes out, we look at it and review it, and anybody that has commentaries or finds errors or whatever like that gives that feedback to the International Code Council, who's publishing the new code. And basically, each jurisdiction has different structural problems. Like, for instance, in New York, you don't have any earthquakes, but you have the high winds from being on the seacoast there. Whereas in California and Nevada, earthquakes are a much bigger factor than the wind. So we discuss the local problems, what kind of design problems are occurring in each locale. And this conference is to get everybody together to see where the common ground is as to what aspects of structural engineering need to be addressed, and what input should be given to the International Code Council about the next code to make the design more in compliance with reality and with basically experience, to make it more in line with reality. And because the building code is a mathematical model, and they're constantly refining it, and as new types of failures and so on come up, they'll find the reasons why these things are acting atypically, and rewrite that portion of the code. And of course, the World Trade Center, there is no precedent. No fireproof steel building has ever collapsed. So there is no precedent, and yet none of these structural engineers associations has addressed this. I mean, I would think that right after 9/11, that there would have been a conference of structural engineers to get together and come out with a white paper, at least, something saying preventing 9/11 type failures. But nobody will touch it. They just don't want to hear about it. They're, like, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. And we have Danielle Duperret, who is a psychologist, and she has spoken at some of our presentations, and she says that it's a period of cognitive dissonance where people just cannot fit this data into their construct of the universe. In other words, the way that their model of the universe and the way things work, these physical facts of the collapse don't match with their beliefs, and so they don't want to hear about it because it's upsetting their apple cart, as it were.
It's fascinating, especially moving out here to California and working with AE so closely now. I get a glimpse into your world of what you guys have studied and how it is different from region to region, all of these factors that have to be taken into consideration when you build buildings. Like I see it just driving through San Francisco, how hilly it is. I mean, you actually have to factor in. It's so hilly that you have to factor in when you're at a red light, accelerating fast so you don't back up into the car behind you. And then you look at the buildings, and these buildings have to be built on that foundation slanting downward. That's got to be a lot more challenging than just building it on flat land out in the Midwest or something where, you don't have to take these into consideration. So these are things that are constantly going on through the minds of architects, structural engineers, all of these different factors, and the fact that they haven't really as an organization or as just a group of professionals across the world looked at this event that is supposed to be unprecedented. I mean, fires never brought down a steel frame high-rise ever before, like in the manner like we saw on 9/11 with Building 7. The fact that this has been run from by the profession is just amazing, considering all the things that they have to take into account just to build buildings and keep on making them safer. So, yeah, I mean, it's fascinating.
The AE911 Truth is that spearhead of structural engineers, architects, design professionals that are saying that, hey, this is what's wrong with the official analysis, and here's our evidence, scientific evidence, and hard evidence from the metallurgists and the physicists, and scientific information that can be with repeatable results, and that's science. And AE911 Truth is that spearhead. And that's why when I said that there was no organization pulling this all together, I startled myself that I didn't think of AE911 Truth is that organization. It's the spearhead of all the building professionals calling out the facts that don't add up.
Good point, Steve. And we have about 90 structural engineers like yourself who are calling for a new investigation and who point out that there have been no changes to the structural engineering codes for these high-rise buildings. And you would think
exactly
that if a 47-story skyscraper like Building 7 can collapse spontaneously from top to bottom in 7 seconds, that there was a structural problem in the building. Have there been any code changes, Steve?
No, there hasn't been. And we've gone through. The codes come out every 3 years. So there was a 2000 code, and then there was 2003, and 2006, 2009, and the one we're under right now is the 2012. But nowhere in there is there any chapter on preventing 9/11 type failures. That's because the laws of physics were obeyed on that day, because the controlled demolition is the reason the buildings came down the way they did. And so that fact is established, and there's not really anything to put in the code except don't put explosives in buildings. I mean, but I mean, there should be a consensus, like the American Society of Civil Engineers. They came out with some kind of a half-assed, half-baked report of 9/11 that basically agreed with the official story, and they just embarrassed themselves. I mean, any engineer, any architect, even a layman can see from the symmetrical collapse. I mean, it's just so phony that they can't explain it. And even when they try to explain, like I say, they use this computer animation. It doesn't look anything like the actual video of the building coming down, and yet they offer it as evidence that they have the answer.
Yeah, it begins to crumple on itself. It's fascinating. Yeah. It looks like a beer can. It looks like, which is nothing like the perfect symmetrical collapse of this building. And I'm blown away how people can imagine this building falling straight down. Steve, could you describe for everybody what it's falling through and how that can even happen?
Well, we know that there had to be explosives to remove the supports, because the amount of time, the free fall acceleration through the descent of 7 seconds proves that there was no resistance from the 40,000 tons of structural steel below. And, of course, the members get heavier as you go down, so the lightest members are at the top, and there's no plausible cause for that collapse other than controlled demolition. It just the symmetry of the collapse, and the fact that there was no deformations in any of these members. They broke, like I said, they broke like glass. And, that's the only way that that the thing could come down the way it did, was by removing structural connections and structural members from the mix.
400 structural steel connections had to fail every second, we calculated, in order to bring this building down. 400 per second. I mean, that
right.
is not a natural collapse. Can you comment on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, fire moves slowly. I mean, it finds a new source of material and it burns that, and then it continues on. But it doesn't burn symmetrically. I mean, a fire is a random process, and depending on which way the ventilating system is blowing the air or whatever. I mean, there are all kinds of factors that will push a fire in a given direction, but it will all be by an organic process of natural, the material, like I say, just a natural process of finding new combustible material, and the fire spreads to that material. But this is all over a long period of time. The fire moves slowly. I don't know. I think there's some number that says that the fires burn for 20 minutes.
Yeah, in a given area, there's only 20 minutes of fuel, so the fire has to move on. So how can the building collapse everywhere simultaneously so that it doesn't tip over? Right.
And that's the thing. The fact that it didn't tip over any of them. The two big ones, World Trade Center 1 and 2 and World Trade Center 7, the fact that they didn't topple that's like the biggest magic trick in the world. I mean, for somebody to make a steel building that was designed to stand up and it's damaged asymmetrically, and yet it has a symmetrical collapse. I mean, it's like saying 1 equals 2. Or 2 plus 2 equals 5. It's as obvious as that. It's just obviously wrong, and you wonder how anybody can doubt it. When you get into the movement, the 9/11 Truth movement, all these things become so obvious, and you study them so much that you just don't understand how people can fail to agree with you. I mean, I don't know. That's what really gets me, is the people that won't even listen. They don't want you say, have you ever done any research about what happened at 9/11? I don't want to hear about 9/11. Oh, there's been enough about that, and just like Bernie Sanders, he's running for the Democratic presidential nomination. And somebody asked him, well, what do you think about 9/11 and these 28 pages? There's been enough investigations. We don't need anything else. So that's somebody that isn't even going to look. I mean, their mind is closed and no entry allowed. So, when you're dealing with people like that, what can you do?
But, Steve, we have 1,000 structural engineers we're going to have the opportunity to rub shoulders with. Elbows.
Yeah.
What do you think they're going to say when they see on the TV monitor this coming Thursday? What are they going to say when they look at that? What are you going to say?
Well, I'm just going to ask them, what happened to the ductility? Where did all of the ductility in the structure go? I mean, it's not there. And but there's like a spectrum of denial among people, and engineers too. There are some that, in their own minds, they're saying, yeah, buildings don't come down like this, but they don't want to believe that the government or whoever could be capable of it, and so they're really like on the fence or whatever, but they will at least look at the materials, maybe pick up a DVD or something. And then there are the ones that are going to walk by going, shut up and go home. You guys are crazy, and, you're just a bunch of, wing nuts and like that. And, you never get upset about it. You just say, why don't you look at the evidence? That's, that's how I'm going to greet anybody that comes near the booth. I'm going to say, what do you think about these buildings coming down symmetrically in 7 seconds? I mean, what's your opinion? I'm not gonna preach to them. I'm going to ask them what they think, and I think that would be a much more productive method than trying to tell them, oh, look, I got the answer, here it is, and This is what happened.
In fact,
I'm going to ask them.
Yeah, that's right. In Atlanta, I asked them, what do you think this building is doing? Because, first of all, they don't even know that it's on 9/11, right? We're just showing them a building coming down, and they say, well, that's a controlled demolition. 90% of them say that for Building 7. And especially the ones in Las Vegas who had seen, these buildings come down so often.
Oh, and, so many of them.
And then we go, well, did you know this happened on 9/11? We've got a conversation here, don't we?
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Like you say, don't mention 9/11. Just show them the building collapsing. Ask them what they think is going on. And then once they give their opinion that it's a controlled demolition, then you say, that's Building 7 of the World Trade Center, So you've answered your own question,
Yeah, did you know a third tower came down on 9/11?
Yeah, that's even another question is to ask them is, do they know how many buildings fell down on 9/11? And if they don't know that it was 3, then you got to say, did you know that a third building, a 47-story skyscraper, also came down in 7 seconds? So, I mean, yeah, that's a real basic starting point. If they don't even know about Building 7, you gotta put that out front, and then ask them what they think happened when you show them the footage of it.
Yeah, and 75% of these structural engineers, we'll do a poll, right, and we're going to figure this out. But I'm guessing right now, based on the architects in Atlanta and other places, 75% of them won't even know about the third worst structural failure in modern history.
Yeah.
That's incredible, isn't it?
I know. It's just such an amazing statistic. It embarrasses the entire profession of engineering and architecture that 75% of these professionals don't even know enough about this tremendous event that was the pretext for 2 wars, that they don't even know what happened that day. It's just amazing how blind. There are none so blind as those who will not see, I guess is what they say, I mean, I know, and I feel, I like to think that structural engineers are intelligent enough that they can use their own critical thinking to come to their own conclusions, and you just show them the evidence. But it's amazing how many people have that cognitive dissonance where it's going to upset their whole construct of the way the world works, and so they don't want to hear about it because it's going to shake their foundation,
Well, and if you pretended that the official story was true, they would be like doctors not knowing what the Black Plague was. Whenever we have major failures like of banks or some kind of economic meltdown, we have panels that analyze it for years afterwards to prevent it from ever happening again. We haven't had that with Building 7.
And they compare the amount of money spent on the investigations. The Monica Lewinsky investigation, they spent $30 million for Monica Lewinsky, and they spent $15 million on the World Trade Center. The biggest crime in history in the United States soil, the biggest crime, and they allotted half as much as the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky sex scandal. So you can see where the priorities of the media are.
So this tour that you're doing with the film is kind of mixed in with your outreach at these conferences, even though they'll be separate events. You're basing it around that, so I'm kind of jumping back and forth here. How long are these Q&A sessions going to be going for, Richard, at these screenings?
Generally, they're about an hour, and we're going to get Steve up there in Las Vegas, and hopefully Pahrump, Steve, if you want to go up there with us. These people are hardcore activists, and they want to help. They want to know what's going on. They want to spread the word, and they're feeding each other a lot of information during the Q&A session particularly, and they're getting the technical information during the film. So it's quite an event. And so I've had them go on 2-3 hours before, and then after that, we go out after a beer after each one of these premieres, and we invite everybody to come with us, and we get into, you know, what's really going on, the stuff that
and that's like a low key social situation. You know, it's not like the presenter is standing up on a stage and there's an audience, but rather like Richard says, you know, we get together, have a beer, and just sit around and talk. And the thing is, you never know what questions people are going to ask, because everybody has different priorities and agendas in their lives, and so you never know what they're going to ask. But with all this evidence and the facts that we have, we can answer any questions that anybody can come up with.
Well, I try not to, but I end up asking those questions, and there are people in these audiences that have a lot of answers because they've been around for a long time, a lot longer than me, and I learn a lot.
So with the publication of the new booklet, right, I mean, there's a tool now that we have for our supporters to be able to reach out to professionals and even non-professionals, because we can, anybody can understand the information in this booklet. But Richard and Steven, I just want to get your impression on it and what supporters can do, your ideas for outreach with the Beyond Misinformation booklet.
This is a 50-page booklet that was put together as a means of trying to bridge a gap between our highly technical papers, which people don't really tend to want to read, and our brochure, which has a summary of the evidence but kind of no detail. So Ted Walter, who has come on board with us to assist us in strategizing what are we missing? Why aren't we not breaking through? Here's this booklet, which has been now printed 40,000 copies in the first month, and we've now given it out to 20,000 architects and engineers all across the country, and we've had supporters by another 20,000 to mail it to media officials, government officials, local architects and engineers, anybody who can appreciate, you know, this level of detail. And I'm very excited about it. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect tool. I mean, we're constantly looking for more effective ways to get this information into the hands of people, and this booklet is like that. Is that tool? It's the thing that's not too technical and not too not dumbed down, like for the lowest common denominator. I mean, of course, you have to be a halfway intelligent person to understand any of it, but it's meant to get to that audience that we haven't gotten to before. And I think it's a really excellent tool for getting, you know, the people don't leave a wide area for you to get in with 9/11. They have preconceived opinions, and some of them doubt it, and they're all political, all politicized, and so on. And trying to find that one little area that is open in their minds that you can put this new brochure into is, I think it's the most effective tool, even better than Blueprint for Truth and the some of the other videos. But I mean, that thing will reach a lot of people.
And it's perfect for coffee tables too. It's a beautifully designed cover, and people aren't going to throw this away. It's a quality piece of work, and what it does is it focuses in on the NIST obfuscation and fraudulent reports and cover-up and destruction of cover-up of the destruction of the evidence, because all this steel was sent to China illegally for recycling within starting weeks, 2 weeks after 9/11, in the case of the Building 7 steel.
It's amazing how many people are getting this booklet. I mean, you can't make them fast enough. I had a guy order one over the phone, or not just one. He ordered like 150 or whatever the amount is, the most you could possibly get. He's got a small, like a remodeling business, and he's handing them out to people that come into his office. Just amazing, the tremendous interest that is being generated in this. And I think it partially because, it's in book form. It's something that you can loan to your friends after you have one. You can hand it out. It's something that people can read in between doing other things. I think this can go viral in the real world where it matters the most. And I just want to commend everybody that's been involved with this. You were on the review panel, review committee. Richard, making sure that everything is all straight and factual. And, it's been publications throughout history that have changed people's thoughts and minds. I think about things like The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. And then you compare that, or you add in the fact that you have these DVDs that have been getting passed around by AE911 Truth for years, the Blueprint for Truth, ESO. I mean, we're creating so many tools that are going to live on in the arsenals of future generations. Even if, 10 years passes, we don't have a new investigation, this public is going to be so vigilant that the government is going to be afraid of trying to cover up something like this again, because they know everybody's watching, So, I mean, this is just truly amazing what we have out there and floating around and available for our supporters.
Yeah, and this new brochure is the kind of thing that it is not so technical that a person reads the first page and then puts it away. It's well written and easy to read, and it doesn't beat you over the head. I mean, it's just a very readable piece of material, and I think that's accessibility of this information is one of the most important aspects that any publication can have. And this publication does that. It's well written and easy to read and easy to absorb the information.
Now, in our last few minutes here, I just want to hear from both of you. There's still a lot of structural engineers, not just structural engineers, but any kind of engineer, many that have the qualifications to comment on this, and architects too, who are considering signing the petition. They may be afraid, and I may have even asked you guys to comment on this on previous shows. We're going to have you do it here because it's come up. I've talked to some who are afraid of signing it. Maybe they have government contracts, whatever. What is the bare minimum that professional groups or individual people in your professions can do to get some action going on this issue, get some attention focused on it, and help out in this important cause?
Well, anybody can send the AE911Truths.org link to architects and engineers in their community. They can send them to their local elected representatives and their federal elected representatives. They can send it to the media. They can send it to everybody else that they know. That's what's called for here, is citizens to stand up, to question authority, to question what they're being told, and to provide the kinds of answers that we have on our website.
Stephen?
I think that young people especially, they have lived their whole lives with the government lying. I mean, about Vietnam, about the Gulf of Tonkin, and the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which that excuse was false. So I mean, the young people that are growing up have grown up with a history of government lying, and so they are much more skeptical than the older folks who were rooting for World War II. I mean, that's not the world we live in anymore, and I think that the young people are just, like I say, from the time they were born in 1995, say, or 1992, the whole time they've been growing up, the government has been caught into lie after lie after lie, And so they just don't trust it. I think there was a poll that said that 49% of people randomly selected, whatever, thought that the government either participated in the attacks or knew about them and failed to do anything. That's 49% of the men on the street. So I think there's a lot of skepticism about the government story out there, and it just needs a focus, which is AE911 Truth.
Well, like we said, the tools are out there. They're available for people to get and pass around, and Richard's going across the Southwest, and there's going to be other tours coming up. I'm sure we'll be talking about those in coming episodes, so there's no excuse anymore. You got to participate in your own history and just take control of your country again and demand accountability on this issue. It is the most important issue. It's the issue around which so many of the things that are bothering us right now are based. So stand up, speak out, use your speech or lose your speech, but you got to do whatever you can to expose the truth. Guys, I want to thank you for coming on 9/11 Freefall.
Thanks for having us.
This program's on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download MP3s of this show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week. Good luck.
If we're in a free country, why are we afraid to just talk about an event that was the most traumatic event in our history? I originally believed the official story. I aggressively defended it. When I first started cracking open that little window that there could be possibly more to this story, I went through every emotion, just like probably a lot of you here who didn't originally believe it or consider it are going through. And I didn't want to believe it. I came up with every excuse not to believe it.
Any building that succumbs to fire, that collapses, starts usually with large gradual deformations, and the building will begin to fall over, not straight down through the path of what was the greatest resistance. These buildings exploded. We have witnesses that hear sounds of explosions.
We started walking down the stairs. We made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails. Like you're in a foundry.
Yeah, like lava.
Like lava.
Volcano.
This is all direct evidence of explosive controlled demolition. Interesting thing is, fire can't create any one of these, let alone all 10.
If the FDNY and other firefighters start speaking out about this, this is going to explode, and it's going to open a lot of people's eyes to what really happened. Make this a normal thing to talk about so that this will spread like wildfire. It's starting now. From speaking out and starting this website and meeting Richard and a lot of the other incredible people here tonight, I've also met some military intelligence officers that have taught me a lot. And I asked one of them, how do we win? We can't get through the media. We can't get through most of our friends and family because it's too scary to talk about. How do we do this? And he said, it's easy, Eric. You just shine the light. And he said, just come from a place of love and not fear. Shine the light.